Then for the final activity of tonight, apart from the party, of course, we got a short panel discussion. While Alex is putting the poofs on stage, I would like to address everybody in the back. Guys, can I have your attention for a second? I'm getting some notes from the audience that it's really hard to hear what's going on here. So I want to ask you guys for the last 30 minutes of today, to please keep it down. Thanks. Yeah, like that. Perfect. Then I would like to invite Dominic back on stage. Where are you? There you are. And Dominic will be hosting our panel talk together with, need to grab my paper, my RAM memory only goes so far, Emily Lin does DevRel at Linea by Consensus. Then we got Thiago Barbosa, the CEO of Stark Express and 3 Sigma. Then we have Raza, there you are, DevRel at Scroll. And last but not least, my dear colleague Max, who does BD at Cartesi. So Dominic, you got a mic. Unfortunately, I only have one extra mic, but since Web3 is all about community and sharing, I assume you guys won't have a problem with that. So I'll start with you.
Nice.
All right.
Hello.
Hello.
Maybe we can start with a short intro of each of you, and why would I, as a developer, choose your rollup?
Cool. Yeah. As Claudio just said, I do BD at Cartesi. So we're slightly different from other rollups. We're application specific. So as a developer, you would choose us if you want, more computational power. The second thing is that we're non-EVM. So we run on top of EVM chains. We run on top of Ethereum. Could run this as a layer 3 as well on top of other rollups. But we have a custom VM based on RISC-V, and that allows us to put a full Linux operating system on top of it, and basically, use traditional programming languages, complex libraries, and existing tooling from Web 2 to build your DApps.
Hi everyone, I'm Raza. I'm a dev at Scroll. Scroll is a zk rollup. I guess there are a bunch of zk rollups popping up, and the reason why you would choose Scroll, I think mainly I guess from 2 angles. One is that from a principle and company point of view, we try to stick very close to the Ethereum principles. So our community and brand is very, very strong. Right now, if you look at the zk space, I'm really glad that the respect that our zk research and engineers get is strong community vibes. And on the other hand, I guess the underlying tech. Right now, we're focusing hard as being really maximizing the compatibility. I think most people would understand the types that Vitalik pointed out, and described. Really, because we see the added value of being close to the Ethereum ecosystem and the developer experience. I often say, as a developer, the reason why you like or love or hate a product is you play around different tech protocols and it's death by 5,000 cuts. It's the getting started page that's not good, or is the tech that just doesn't work as promised. So delivering on those basics in value, I really believe that Scroll will have a distinguishing factor.
Hello everyone, I'm the CEO at Stark Express and 3 Sigma. My name is Thiago. So the reason why we chose to build on Stark Express as a layer 2 is because we're abstracting everything that is complicated about blockchain technology. So you don't need to learn about consensus algorithms, smart contracts, cryptography. Everything is abstracted and you build only using Web 2 APIs. So you could use the programming languages that everyone is already very familiar with, coming from a Web 2 background, and still for the end users of applications who are built on top of Stark Express, You also don't have gas markets. You have Web2 latency. You can have private transactions. It has very high TPS. So if you are already like an existing Web2 business that has Web2 users, you can pretty much do the transition to blockchain technology, and the end user would never understand that there was the transition and now you have digital assets and they are working with the security of Ethereum. The reason why we believe that is extremely important also is, well, everyone is competing for the same pool of Web3 developers. Everyone that's on this room probably is very technical. They understand all of the intricacies of blockchain technology. But if you really want mass adoption to come to blockchain, we actually need to start talking with people that don't understand like all of the different parts. Now everyone is even talking about like the modular stack. For us, we understand all of these different components, but it's very important if people actually don't need to understand any of them to interact with our technology and come play in the Web3 world.
Cool. So hi, I'm Emily. I'm with Linea. Before I dive into it, I know Raza mentioned, oh, all of you are familiar with zkEVMs, the different types. Is that true? Okay, so the majority of the audience actually doesn't know the different types of zkEVMs, which I think is actually very important when talking about, you know, the differences between the zk rollups. So I'll just cover this really fast. So type 4 you can think of as high-level equivalent, so you can write in Solidity, but that compiles to a different VM, to a different like bytecode. So your tools have to change. So that's going to be something like StarkNet, zk sync. They are not bytecode compatible. As you move closer to 1, so 1 is Ethereum equivalent. Type 2 is where Linea is going. So that's, you can write in Solidity. We are also going for bytecode equivalence. So literally nothing changes, right? So I guess for Scroll and Linea, when we talk about like being very close to the EVM or Ethereum, right? That's constantly changing. We are able to kind of adapt the fastest to that, as well as your tooling doesn't change, right? There's a really strong use case for network effects. So if you write in a different language, right, you have to find a whole new set of auditors who need to learn how to do that. There's a bunch of like education out there already with regards to Solidity, like finding and developing an entirely new community, really difficult. And then when you dive into Linea itself, so like let's forget about the tech part, let's focus on the users, right? We live within the consensus ecosystem, so there's like native integrations with MetaMask, which you guys all probably have. But also, right, Infura, our clients, Teku, Bezu, all of that. So again, like pushing that network effect part is Linea.
Thanks. And like as we can see, the L2 space gets super crowded, right? So there are many different L2s, many different designs, some are super similar. What must a project bring basically to survive? Like what do you think? What would be the 2 key parts? And try to keep it short.
The 2 key parts, okay, community and collaboration. Should I expand or is that short enough?
That's okay. Does someone want to respond?
Yeah. I think different L2 designs bring different value propositions and have different problems. So there's a lot of competition, for example, on the zkEVM side. Then on like different virtual machines, you can talk, for example, about Polygon Maiden and StarkNet. Probably are the ones that are competing the most in this angle. Then we also have like optimistic rollups, like Cartesi doing more complex things like Linux operating systems. You could also talk about like RISC-V and Bonsai. All of them, I would say, have different targets of audience, have different value propositions and places that they're trying to find in the market. I think, bottom line, if you want your project to survive, it would be very interesting if you could abstract it all away. Of course, it might be a biased opinion because that's exactly what we're doing at Stark Express. But at the end of the day, if the barriers to entry for both the users and the developers are too high, I think it's going to be very hard to continue competing in this ever-evolving space.
Yeah, I guess my answer, the easy one, is a combination of what was mentioned both. I think community is very, very important. It's very important to Scroll as who we are. But like generally speaking, I guess for L2s, I 100% agree. I think that there will be different needs. I think there will be subtle but important differences when it comes to maybe gas fees or compatibility or interoperability. So I think that is what you're seeing right now in the ZK, especially in the ZK tech space, we're not done yet. So we're still developing, and you're gonna see this, like you're gonna see design choices that make a difference for, especially the developer, but you know, also the end user. And even though we try to optimize, like Emily said, you know, for the type 2, thanks for explaining that. By the way, no one raised their hands for the MetaMask question, but to try to optimize, you know, for the developer experience. So I think that there will be, like you mentioned, I think it's a key factor. I think different needs for developer and end users will dictate the development of L2s and potentially who will survive.
Yeah, not much to add. Indeed, like a lot of trade-offs. There's always trade-offs, especially on the tech side. And there's no one size fits all. So depending on your requirements, there's a bunch of different options. And that's really cool. And indeed, community plays a big role as well. So again, there's not one size fits all. Maybe there's certain communities that are better fit for you.
Cool. Yeah, like, why do you think that Arbitrum leads the L2 space by such a margin?
In terms of TVL?
Yes?
Yeah.
Or economic activity, as Polynia would say.
Yeah, I guess I would say like they were quite early to market, and they have a pretty strong DeFi community. And DeFi is sort of the main, like the most established, mature use case for blockchain right now.
Yeah, just to add on top of that, I think that one thing that Arbitrum did really well is the dev experience as well. As far as I've played with it, and then I've spoken to some of my DevRel colleagues, it's just that deploying was seamless. It just worked. And like I mentioned, you know, why I believe that, you know, not too shill, but when I did my intro for Scroll, I said, you know, as a developer, we all, like, for those who are developers, know the pain, death by 5,000 cuts, because it's like, and this is not working, is that not working? Anyone playing with AI models right now, it's, you know, any repo you see is just pip install requirements. Yo, pip install my ass. It's not like you just use it and then it just works. You need to tinker with it. And I just think that what Arbitrum did really well is that the dev experience was as promised and delivered. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I do think that probably the reason why Arbitrum has taken the lead is not only on the technical side. So unfortunately, like, we are still a very immature industry per se. We see all of the TVL like basically going around the same chains. It's always the same users, the same money, like, just like floating. And of course, the economic factors, such as, for example, like airdrops and everything else, also pretty much helps with getting more attention on the chain. That's also, for example, you can consider it to be also the reason why, for example, zkSync has gained more adoption than Polygon zkEVM, even though on the technical level it can be discussed which one is better, but on the adoption side, I mean, zkSync still doesn't have a token, Polygon has Matic out, so people look at it, and between the two options, well, maybe I will go to zkSync and risk getting an airdrop. So I think that's probably the factor that influences the most. The second one, a little bit more on the technical side. So if you're looking at scaling solutions, you should also try and build new DeFi primitives that take advantage of the solutions. An example could be like, you couldn't have GMX running on Ethereum, but you can have Uniswap v2 running on Ethereum as well. So if your chain is only like working with protocols that were built because of Ethereum's design and like its limitations, like probably it will not bring as much adoption as if you're going to like start working on new DeFi primitives, like well, I wouldn't say it's like a new DeFi primitive, but at least new implementation details on a protocol like GMX that brings a lot of user activity, a lot of liquidity, and new use cases to your ecosystem.
Yeah, I feel like I agree. Maybe my hot take here is a rollup is successful because of its users, not because of its developers. Oh, okay. Also because of a developer experience kind of thing, but it's kind of a chicken and egg. For Arbitrum specifically, you asked this question, so you just go on DeFi Llama. It is GMX. They're like driving all of the liquidity in like the TVL, right? So when we think about like rollups and being successful, it becomes, what is the killer DApp that's going to attract the most users and attract liquidity? And once that's there, then that is also incentivizing developers and builders and entrepreneurs to say, hey, there's a lot of opportunity here because all of these users have already onboarded into this ecosystem. And so Arbitrum, I think, got really lucky with GMX as well as just being the first. Especially, it's really key for, I think, rollups to be on mainnet early. Because something for like a DeFi app, right? When we're like, onboard onto Linea, they're like, why? You're only on testnet. You're not making me me any money, right? So I'm not going to actually onboard until you're in mainnet. So it's a combination of dev experience, apps that are there, and also kind of whether or not you're on mainnet, testnet, and obviously the airdrop. Like that definitely drives. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, just like I do think that the airdrop is a pretty decisive motive, because GMX is also live on Avalanche, for example, and you could also have the same user experience in Avalanche, but people just decided to use it in Arbitrum because, hey, maybe the Arbitrum token will be airdropped, and in the end, at the end of the day, it was.
When we talk about airdrops, that could be interesting and might be a controversial question. Why does an L2, especially a zkEVM, need their own token?
I feel like I'm not allowed to say anything on this topic because that's like, oh, we're thinking about it, but not necessarily, right? But I mean, in terms of like whether or not you need a token, I don't think you actually do, right? You can get money through like fees and all of that. I think tokens are really good for like incentivizing DApps maybe to build, used as governance. There are use cases for it, but I think at least like linear, that's not our focus right now, right? If that happens, like I think tokenomics is a really important thing you have to think about, but like just to willy-nilly say I'm gonna have a token is actually a very, I think, controversial thing to say, because you don't want to accept just like people who are farmers, right? That's not gonna create like long-term use. I don't know if that answered the question, but
Definitely.
So will there be a token? Hopefully. But with regards to like should an L2 have a token, I think it depends on its decentralization goals. If you want to decentralize your sequencer and your prover, I think it's quite hard if you don't have a token of yourself to create like a network effect for people to actually enter these networks. Of course, there's a lot of discussion, for example, around eigenlayer and, for example, using RISC-V to use it. But people who restake ETH, they actually need to get rewards. That's part of how eigenlayer works. And if you don't have a native token for your L2, I'm not exactly sure how you're actually going to be incentivizing people to restake ETH for your own sequencer. So at the end of the day, I think this is still like a big open question, because if you have a token to decentralize, or if you use restake ETH, you might say, okay, we don't want to continue using the token, but for us to have restake ETH, we actually need the token, because at least we need to provide some economic incentive to people who are restaking ETH. But at the same time, if people are buying my token, then they're just getting diluted, because the people who are restaking ETH, like I'm going to print more of my own token to give it to them. So I'm not sure where the economic incentive would align. Right now, I do believe that L2s will continue having their own token to decentralize the parts of the sequencer and the prover. Because, for example, in Arbitrum's case, I mean, you use Ethereum for the gas, you don't use the Arbitrum token. If you just go and restake ETH to decentralize the rest of the components, I mean, what is the Arbitrum token for? Just to incentivize people to restake ETH? Like, there's no sink in value. So at the moment, yes, I would say that L2s will continue having their own tokens, having control over their monetary policies, instead of decentralizing with other tokens.
I mean, I don't need to add much to what was said, but I will say, so the question, do you need L2s? Do they need a token? No. And I think the things that have already been mentioned, I think the main thing, and I'll just summarize it because I think it's all been said, I find it very difficult to find the economic incentive, and it feels like it's more reasoning towards having a token rather than that there is a problem that we solve with having a token.
Just as a question that you can answer in addition, but could it be that the token incentive for L2 is from the old world, where we had different side chains that needed to be secured by proof of stake? And can it be that for L2s we need a different model, not a token model, to also to get money or to incentivize users?
I'm not sure, because like I said, I think the zk Rollups has a entirely different architecture than POS. So there are loads of things that we need to revisit. So I do think that these questions are being asked behind closed doors for every zk Rollup. Why token? And I think we know the answer, when this is done. But like I said, I wouldn't. Yeah, it is something from the old world, yes. But again, it comes back to, do you need it? And then, why that I have difficulties answering that question.
Thanks.
Yeah, so we're not ZK, and we do have a token. I think, like, I agree with everything. I don't think you necessarily need a token either. But I do think it could play a big role in, like, governance and, like, aligning incentives within the community. And then obviously things like, you know, slashing, rewarding behavior to maintain security. Obviously you could use other tokens as well to do that, like ETH, but yeah.
I do think that if we move into like common infrastructure such as shared sequencers and solutions like Espresso systems, you could end up not requiring a token, but still at the time it's like you said, I really believe that the economic incentive is more aligned towards every L2 issuing their own token.
Got it. And do you think that maybe in 1 year or in 2 years, L2s will somehow converge, like using a shared sequencer or using in the zk tag the same field, or maybe a common prover, or like using something to establish interoperability? Or will we have these silos of L2s that operate independently?
Well, if tech Twitter is saying anything, it seems like we're very far away from that. And so I think there are multiple elements to if that potentially would happen. I think on the technical level, as I said, ZK tech is maturing. So that's like on the technical side of things a bit far away. But I think that what we're noticing right now in Web3 as well is loads of people came because of the ethos and the principles. But at the end of the day, we also see companies. So I think that if there's an aligned incentive model, I don't know, like I haven't thought enough about it, but what that would look like, I guess it's a possibility. And at the end of the day, if it would benefit the end user in such a way, and then all parties involved benefit as well, then I can see it moving towards that for sure. But then again, on a technical level, there's a thing. So on the short term, I just find it difficult to envision what that would look like.
Yeah, I think one part of the question I'd like to answer is like the ZK versus optimistic rollup question. I think a lot of use cases we see on Ethereum today will be kind of gobbled up by ZK rollups. But you know, there will always be needs for more compute, and you know, proving costs are quite expensive and will probably remain expensive, even if they will drop eventually, or at least it will be cheaper still to do it on optimistic rollup. So there's not like one solution fits all, and I think depending on your needs, again, you might opt for one or the other. Yeah. Oh yeah, and I think interoperability is a bit overrated as well. Like not everything needs to be perfectly composable. Like in some use for some use cases, like asset composability at like the base layer is sufficient.
So I do believe that a lot of the advancements that we see on the ecosystem are pretty much dictated by the collective mindset of venture capitals and where they direct capital for things to be built. And we see a lot of capital being directed towards interoperability, bridges, solutions like Succinct Labs, Polymer. And at the end of the day, I do believe that the entities that control the flow of value, the capital, they do benefit from having like a shared ecosystem, shared liquidity. So I believe that they will continue funding these projects, and at the end of the day, like the blockchain ecosystem will evolve into a common set of rails where capital flows in a much more free way per se. So yeah, I do believe that eventually things will keep converging. That's also part of the reason why we're building a solution that abstracts it all the way, because as the ecosystem evolves, we are positioned in a way of like, we already solved the abstraction, we already know how to simplify the things for the users and for the developers, and then we can continue like working in our niche technology world, keep iterating things on the back end, improving bridge solutions, interoperability solutions, but we already have fixed basically like the bridge into outside Web3.
Cool. So to answer your question, in 1 to 2 years, I have no clue. I'm not that smart. But to the question of will we all converge on a decentralized sequencer, for example, absolutely. I think that is a single point of failure. We cannot be there. When we talk about like converging maybe provers, does who in the audience has heard of like the multi-prover theory? Oh, okay, nobody. Very cool. So basically what that states is, okay, all of our zk rollups, right, have a prover. Our provers are our own tech. There is a possibility that there's going to be a bug, right? So if everything is going through our own prover, no, right? So multi-prover is basically saying like, hey, you can take all these transactions, feed it through each of our different provers, right? So Scroll, Polygon zkEVM, Linea, or something like that. And you get this like composable layer of like, hey, we need a consensus to say this is correct. So even if Linea has a bug, and Scroll does not, then maybe Scroll will say, this is true. I'll say it's true, you say it's false, and then, wow, okay, that's amazing. You know, and that's something we need, and I think is critical to the, you know, success of the L2 space. But yeah.
Cool. Wouldn't that be converging into like an optimistic model of zk rollups? Like it looks like if we're basically it's pretty much like everyone is proving the same transactions. Some say like are correct, like you reach different states, then you would need like some slashing mechanism, and it looks like a little bit like falling back into an optimistic path on zk rollups. And I also believe that yes, I agree with you on like the timeline of 1 to 2 years. But once we start like formally verifying circuits, I do believe that these problems will eventually evaporate, or at least I hope so.
Yeah, I guess to the point of like optimistic zk rollups, I don't know, that's an interesting way of phrasing it. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think when we think about like optimistic versus zk rollups, we're talking more about like the existence of that challenge period to wait for 7 days to withdraw because of the fraud proofs. The reason zk rollups are winning right now, right, is validity proofs. Like they're not the fastest, they are much faster than 7 days, right? I think as prover technology improves, we get faster and faster. Like that's kind of the problem of optimistic that it solves, right? So optimistic zk isn't a bad thing, right? Yeah, so.
Yeah, in a way, it could look like this if you have several provers and you need consensus. Then, yeah. Cool. Yeah, maybe a last question. Imagine we have like we have solved the scaling problem. Like we're trying to scale Ethereum now since 7 years or so, right? So imagine that rollups are the thing now, and there's not coming something else. What else, like if we don't think about scaling, what else would we tackle next?
Yeah, so I guess like it always just comes back down to use case, right? So once the experience is as smooth as possible, you need to onboard users because they want to be there. Like, I honestly, like, DeFi is such a small segment of the population, or just like financial stuff in general. I'm gonna out myself, like, I only really invest in the S&P 500, right? So like, I'm very, don't include, okay, I do have some stuff in like crypto, obviously, but I'm saying like 100 million users are not going to be like, you know, all in on token and stuff like that, right? So, I mean, in terms of what I guess L2s can do in like with regards to onboarding, say we've solved the scaling problem, then we're starting to focus on, hey, we've developed these really vibrant ecosystems. How do we incubate that community? How do we fund the correct projects? And I don't know, like support them. Ultimately, we're like infrastructure, right? So I don't think scaling Ethereum will ever be. Things can always be made faster. I'm going to say that.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I do think that for prioritization of these use cases, we should get more feedback from the market. But up until now, the user experience is so bad for anything that's Web3 that's even hard to get feedback from the market. Like if you get everyone from your city to tell them, okay, what you would like to see being built with the capabilities of like a decentralized ledger, they'll say like, what the fuck are you talking about? I do think that it will take a while, but definitely more use cases, better user experience, more users in general, understanding exactly like on the human scale, on the society scale, what is exactly blockchain good for? Because up until now, that's completely a question mark.
Yeah, that last point was actually the point I was going to make. Is that I really think that what's going to happen, like I think the cool thing about the AI storm is that a lot of people, at least like in my environment, that are like completely disconnected from, let's say, tech, like my friends who are maybe a logistic company, like are looking at tech saying, whoa, tech is advancing a lot. And we kind of didn't manage to do that with blockchain other than crypto scams, FTX is happening. And when I explained to them what zero knowledge could do for them from a decentralized identity point of view, or even scaling in, like they're smart people and they can have an appreciation for it. Maybe to out myself, like Emily did, I definitely have an investment portfolio, a significant proportion in crypto, but I'm not too sure about the convergence, for instance, on the low level, on the infrastructure level, whether that's sequencer or the multi-prover theory. The reason being is because I see these separate teams working extremely, extremely hard on their own tech, and like I said, like I answered in the previous question, I see them have subtle differences, and on these subtle differences, they'll serve different purposes. So what's next? I definitely don't think we should innovate to innovate, but what I do think is going to happen is that I see a rise of L3 happening, and I can see another layer existing where there is no convergence of sequencer or a multi-prover, but there is really separate worlds. And maybe that is kind of a multi-prover, like a different layer that does that. But I'm not sure about the 1 to 2 years, and I'm also not sure about the convergence, because the world I see today is, from my point of view, is very, very far from it. And maybe not even so on a technical level, but when it comes to, let's say, the cooperation in space, I mean, you rightfully mentioned the narrative of VC money, for instance. Like, I would say that's a huge obstacle. So I think that looking at where there's to innovate, I think these problems will be solved. The technical limitations, for instance, on decentralization of sequencer, or the security of the proof node and the accuracy of the proof node, but through different means. Where that's gonna happen, I can't see yet, because I'm like Emmy, I'm also not so smart, but I'm curious to see what's gonna happen.
Yeah, I agree with everything that was said. I think a big thing is, like, I don't think maybe we'll solve scaling, but like we'll always want more scale. Like, we always want more complex, like, to do more complex things, basically. So I think that will be like a never-ending problem. Or not problem, but something that we will always strive to like improve. I also think we could see more experimentation at like layer 3, and like to plug Cartesi a bit, like I think we can do, like, it kind of opens, like layer 3 opens up kind of the design space for execution. So you could have very different types of VMs and stuff like that, and do also stuff like Thiago is doing with Stark Express, kind of abstraction layers that open up the space to a lot more developers, which again is a chicken and egg problem. You need users, and we need applications that actually need this tech. But yeah, I don't know. I'm curious to see what will happen.
Cool. Thanks a lot. I think that's it.
All right, everybody. Before we go get some pizza and beers, Dominic, thanks for hosting. Great questions. I want to thank all of you for being so quiet. No, let's give that a round of applause. It almost scared me. And to finish off the list, I would like to thank Epic Web3, Alex and Ollie for hosting this amazing day. I hope you all got what you came for. Now let's get some pizza.